This is the Big Ideas Theater at AARC. I'm Ed Highland. I'm joined now by Dr. Eduardo Morelos. Thank you so much for coming by from the Cleveland Clinic, telling us a little about some of the designing evidence-based protocols for the intensive care unit. Give us an idea what you're talking about here.
So the challenge that I always have had has been, how do we get what's published and get it to the patient bedside? So it seems simple. You put all these data out from trials that are designed with a very small population or that represent different areas of the world, and they generate knowledge, and that knowledge has to get to the bedside. How do we do it? So our ICU in the Cleveland Clinic is a very large one, which brings on itself an extra layer of difficulty, because now I have to train a large amount of people to do something similar that we want to apply to a group of patients. That's where the challenge came. That's what the talk is about.
All right, well, tell us how. How do you overcome this?
So the first challenge is you have to decide what you want to implement. And as you're deciding what to implement, there's all this literature that comes through. So in the group of clinicians that make the Cleveland Clinic, you have to get them together and give them a space for them to have a voice. And as the conversation occurs, you start hearing a lot of knowledge that comes through of how they interpret what the literature has said. But there has to be a point of compromise. And that point of compromise is where you essentially filter everything that they're telling you to put it together into words. And once that you have done that, then there comes the next step, which is, okay, I know what you want me to do as a group. How do we make it operational? That's the second part, which is the second biggest challenge. That challenge is, how do I make this idea get there? And I'll give you an example. We said, well, let's just use this mode of mechanical ventilation, to this specific mode, as the first one to start with all the patients. What we realized is our ventilators could not do it. Some ventilators did exactly what we thought that they were going to do. Some of them did not. So then that makes you back off and say, well, what is actually what we have? What tools do we have? You may want to do it, but the machines and the environment may not allow you to do it. So that led us to, every time that you go through this process, you start learning a lot more. So every single step was a publication that we generated of implementation, of saying, look at this. If we had just implemented it, we would not be implementing the idea. It would have been implemented erroneously, just because you thought that it was happening.
So these protocols, which have worked for Cleveland Clinic, can they be modified for other size units, for other hospitals? Because what works in Cleveland may not work in Poughkeepsie.
Absolutely. So a common thing is that they will reach out to you and they would say, Eduardo, can you share your protocol? Because what they want to do is grab that protocol and implement it in their unit. The challenge is that the ideas are there, they're great, but you have to see your environment. For example, how many respiratory therapists do you have? What type of population are you dealing with? How often are the interventions that you want to do being implemented, and how are you going to be monitoring them? And that is very dependent on the place where you work. A small unit may just require 1 or 2 respiratory therapists to implement a beautiful protocol with one single machine. But when you start scaling it up, it requires other items. So in general terms, I think that as these protocols come out or guidelines come out, you have to see them within the eye of the environment where you live, and you have to be very honest.
So what is the number one obstacle? I mean, you've kind of covered on all those bases, but what is the number one obstacle, you think?
The number one is ego and communication. There's all of us want to do the best for the patient, and all of us have been doing things time after time that you think that it's the best for the patient, and suddenly you sit in a room and they tell you, we want to do it this different way. And that requires some level of honesty, of acceptance, of saying, all right, let's talk about it. How do we do it? and just say, all right, we'll try it, but we need to follow up on it. And if it's not working, we need to readdress it. So yes, ego is not your amigo.
So the feedback then becomes incredibly important. I mean, as you say, implementing the protocols, everyone has to be on board with getting it started, but then you have to be able to get the feedback. Okay, well, this part worked, but maybe this didn't.
Absolutely. So, and this is what we call auditing. So you have to have somebody that is willing to accept that they're not perfect. That's a common thing that now in all what we do is based on metrics. And we always have been trained to get 10, to get 100%, to be the perfect kid, you know? And reality is not like that. We have to actually cherish and grow our teams to recognize and catch errors. And as you start catching errors, the more you catch, the more safe the environment becomes. It's not the 100%, it's the more errors you catch, the more you are looking at how do I improve the process, how do I make it better, and are honest about not performing always good. That is what counts.
And I will never forget, ego is not your amigo. Eduardo, thank you so much for coming by and sharing with us today.
My pleasure, thank you.
This is the Big Ideas Theater at AARC. I'm Ed Highland.